All right, thank you all for joining us. Melanie Richardson, your floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. Welcome and thank you everyone for tuning in on your computers, laptops, phones, or whatever other device you're tuning into. Tonight, we are holding Valley Water's virtual public update meeting on the Palo Alto Flood Basin Tide Structure Replacement Project. I'm Melanie Richardson, Valley Water's Chief Operating Officer of Watersheds, and I'll be your MC for tonight's meeting. Before we begin, I wanted to give you an overview of today's virtual meeting. We'll first do a quick orientation on the Zoom platform and its function. Then you'll hear opening, welcoming remarks from Valley Water Board Director Gary Crimmen, who represents your area. From there, we'll move into our main presentation about the project's background, impacts, and benefits. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer segment where you will all have an opportunity to ask questions about the project. Finally, we'll end the meeting with an overview of the project's next steps. The Zoom event includes other Valley Water staff that can help you to answer questions about the project. Before we get into our presentation on the project tonight, I would like to turn the floor over to Albert Lee, who will go over some logistics about the Zoom platform. Albert?
All right, thank you, Melanie. Right now, I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here. Thank you all for joining us. Tonight's meeting is a listen-only webinar. I'm going to share a screen here, and just give me 1 moment. Apologies, I have less screens today than I usually do. Let's do that 1 more time here. Thank you all for your patience. All right, let's try this 1 more time. Here we go. We got to go in now. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, so today's webinar is a listen-only webinar. If you haven't already, you are probably listening to us via your computer, but if you're having issues with your audio, please feel free to call in using the number on the screen and the meeting ID that was on your invites, on also the website as well. A lot of tonight's presentation is actually posted online at the project webpage. It's valleywater.org/PAFB Tidegates. The presentation is on there, and you'll be able to follow along as well if you're having video issues. Now, we will have an opportunity to ask questions during our presentation. We do recommend that you input your questions through our Q&A portal. That will go on our end, and then you'll see them on your end as well. Alternatively, if you feel more comfortable, you can also ask your question verbally. We ask that you raise your hand, and then once we see that your hand is raised, we'll call your name out and enable your microphone. Once that happens, you'll just have to unmute yourself and just verbally ask your question. Now, if you're on the phone, you can also ask and raise your hand as well. To ask a question, you'll press *9, and to unmute yourself is *6. Again, if you're on the phone only and you want to ask a question and raise your hand, *9 is to raise the hand and *6 is to unmute yourself. We do have a chat function on this webinar. We don't recommend putting your questions on there. We have found that many questions tend to get very buried as part of the chat box. So again, we do recommend using the Q&A portal. All right, that's it for me. Melanie, the floor is back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Albert. Appreciate that. I would now like to introduce Director Gary Crimmen, who will share some opening remarks. Director Gary Crimmen represents District 7, which includes the cities of Palo Alto, Mountain View, Los Gatos, Los Altos Hills, Monte Sereno, and the southern part of San Jose's Almaden Valley. Please welcome Director Gary Crimmen.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Richardson. Can people hear me? All
Loud
right.
and clear, Director.
Great. Hey, thank you, all of you, for joining kind of this virtual meeting. I know you all have a lot on your plate and a lot to do. My name is Gary Crimmen. I represent Palo Alto among the other communities. And again, welcome you tonight. Here's a phone number to write down, 415-305-3052. That's my personal cell phone. And if you don't think the questions got answered tonight, feel free to give me a call. The reason we're here tonight is to discuss the Palo Alto flood basin tidal gate structure. We'll just call it the tidal gate structure, and why we need to replace it. And it's pretty old, and as you know, or as you may not know, but Valley Water is responsible for flood control. We do it for businesses, we do it for schools, we do it for highways, we do it throughout the entire county. And as part of that commitment, we're going to pay to replace this flood control tidal basin with funds that come from our Valley Water Watershed and Stream Stewardship Fund that voters voted for. Thank you. Might be coming up for renewal. And so this tidal gate and the flood basin provide critical flood protection. If you're like me, you live on Matadero Creek or Adobe or Barron Creek, or you go on Highway 101, this helps protect you from floods. Number two, also the flood basin serves an important environmental function because it provides important habitat for migrating birds and other animals. And you might not be aware of, but it's part of the Adobe Creek Loop Trail, which anyone who's been out there loves that trail, part of the Bay Trail. You can go out there and walk and bike and look at the beauty. And sometimes when you're out there, you don't even know you're in Silicon Valley. But to maintain that trail, to keep the habitat and protect the businesses, we have to replace the tidal gate structure. Why? It was built a long time ago. Might have lost you there for a sec. It was built a long time ago in 1957, and it was only meant to work for 50 years, and it's actually over its useful life. And because of where it is, its age and its location, and it gets salt water, pretty corrosive marine environment, it's deteriorating. The steel's falling apart, water's seeping through, the concrete's cracking, and the gate seal itself is breaking. In fact, in 2017, we tried to replace it. But when we tried to do that, to extend the service life, we found even more problems. So now we got to replace it in total. So anyone who believes in science probably believes in sea level rise. And this was not built for sea level rise. Now we need to upgrade it to drain the flood basin in case of sea level rise, which will happen. So this is a pretty important project because there's between, however you slice it, between 400 and 700 homes and businesses who in Palo Alto around these creeks, again, Barron, Adobe, Matadero, and 101. So while we replace it, we're really committed to minimizing anyone losing recreational access. There's going to have to be a little of that and effects on the environment. And we understand that it's going to limit parts of the trail for a little while. But it's kind of like San Francisco Creek. We limited the access to the trail, but once it's done, the flood protection's great. But if we don't do anything, it risks failure and we'll lose access to the trail indefinitely. So we're committed to fixing this thing in a cost-effective way, in a way that minimizes environmental impact. So our staff's going to talk about this, but before I say anything, pass it over to staff, I want to thank the city of Palo Alto, who's been a great partnership and collaborator on this project. And we might have some other elected officials. I don't know if Ms. Cormack's here. Maybe we could acknowledge her if there's some others. And Domingo, is there any elected officials here?
We do have a representative from Assemblymember Mark Berman's office. So Leslie Bulbuck is here representing the Assemblymember. And let's see if there are any other elected officials or staff, they can utilize the raise hand function on Zoom. And I will be more than happy to acknowledge them in the next few seconds. Doesn't look like it. So nope, back to you, Director.
We also have Allison Cormack on the line. Allison, Councilmember Cormack, would you like to say a few words?
Just saying hello. Thank you so much for the partnership. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Kremen, back to you.
Thanks, Councilperson Cormack. Yeah, so again, thanks, Domingo, for recognizing public officials. Too bad Mr. Berman couldn't make it, Assemblyperson Berman couldn't make it. So now I'm going to return the floor to Ms. Richardson, who has a lot of answers on this critical project.
Thank you, Director Kremen. Actually, I rely on my staff for all the answers on this critical project. So with that, I really wanted to hand the floor off to members of the project team, including Roger Narson, Robert Yamane, and Alex Hunt.
Thank you, Melanie. This is Roger Narson. Just want to today go over the project setting, why we are doing this project, and how do you plan to do this project. That's what we are going to go through in the next few slides. To start with, the project's located in South Bay, nearby the Palo Alto Airport, adjacent to the Palo Alto wastewater treatment plant, as well as adjacent to the closed landfill area. It's east of Highway 101. That is the location of this project. And as you can see here, right in the middle of the slide, that's where the Palo Alto flood basin is. It's around 600 acres. It's like a bathtub. And you have 3 creeks draining into the basin. On the left side, as you can see, Metadera Creek draining into that. On the lower right, the 2 creeks, Basin Creek and Adobe Creek, they drain into that corner. And then you have also one more storm drain from a pump station outlet. It's called Coast Casey Pump Station. That drains from the city of Mountain View area. So the total drainage area for all these 4 inputs is like 39 square miles. And for example, Adobe Metadera Creek for 100-year flow is 3,000 cubic per second. Basin and Adobe combined together, they're like 3,000 cubic feet per second. And the Coast Casey Pump Station, it pumps around 150 CFS into the basin. So there's quite a bit of flow right in the basin. So as you can see here, the northmost corner in the red circle, that's where the structure we are talking about. And on the left side, you can see like a Palo Alto Airport strip. And also you can see the Palo Alto boat docking area right there. Also, it is the confluence of Mayfield Slough on the left side and the Charleston Slough on the right side. So that kind of gives you the project setting, where we are and how important this project is, because it is holding the higher tidal water from the bay. So the starting water surface elevation for these 3 creeks will be lower. There's no coastal flooding due to the high tidal water. Let's go to the next one. So this slide is kind of showing the trail starting from the Bixby Park parking lot area. The trail traverses from the parking lot, as you can see. So on the right side is the closed landfill, and the left side is the Mayfield Slough. And we are hugging right next to the Metadera Creek on the right side. And there you see the structure, the existing tailgate structure. And this view is the trail, Adobe Loop Trail, coming from San Antonio Road. It passes through the Coast Casey Pump Station. On the left side, it hugs around Adobe Creek. The right side is the Charleston Slough. And as you can see here, there is another tight gauge structure along Charleston Slough, which is managed by City of Mountain View. So on the left side is Adobe. You can see a borrow pit in the loop trail, access road, and there you see the structure. So we have seen the whole loop around the basin. And this one shows the high water from the bay side. It's a 360 degrees view versus the low water in the flood basin. As you can see the wooden pole, how high the water is versus the same wooden pole on the basin side, shows the difference of how the structure is holding the tidal water inside the basin. So this is the aerial view showing the high tide water on the bay side, and you can see the basin side so low water. So high water on the other side. It's at the confluence of Mayfield Slough and Charleston Slough, right at the nose of it. And on the right side, you can see Hooks Island, which is environmentally sensitive area. The whole basin area is set up in an environmentally sensitive area. So this slide shows the low tide. As you can see, the mud flats are opened up. You see the Hooks Island on the right side. And so both Mayfield Slough and Charleston Slough, they confluenced here. You can see the structure. You can see the more water in the basin and low tide on the basin side. This slide kind of describes how the tide gate works. It's a passive tide gate. It works by the gravity or the water pressure based on how much water gets on one side. So you have a high tide, the bay water, which is shutting the gate one side, can only open one way. So right now the gate is shut. See the low side is the basin, a flood basin, the low water, and the water gets accumulated by the three creeks in the pump station. It keeps on going up. So if you go to the next slide, it will show once the water comes up on the flood basin side, the water level is high. For the low tide, the water is low. Then the gate opens because of the pressure and the level head difference. It opens up. It's a passive gate. That's the main structure here. It acts like a bridge for the access road. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this one shows, this slide, the high water on the bay side, the low water on the basin side. So it is kind of structure works. That's the main purpose of the structure. Not letting into the basin. And that way you can control the starting water surface elevation for those three creeks, as well as the outfall from the pump station. So the existing structure condition we are going to see furthermore. At this point, I'm going to turn this into presentation to Robert Mani to talk about the project details. So Robert.
All right. Thank you, Roger. And your voice just cut out just for a second, so I'm just going to repeat that. This slide shows the high water on the bay side on the right-hand side, as you can see, compared to the same water surface in relation to the wood poles on the basin side, which is much lower. In the next slide, I'm just going to go over the background real quickly. As we've talked about, the structure was constructed in 1957, and you know, the Palo Alto flood basin, the levees, and the tide gate structure, they really maintain the water surface elevation in the basin, which is 600 acres. And that's necessary so that the Adobe, Barron, and Matadero Creeks, which drain into the basin, have that capacity for a large storm event. It also, the levees and the tide gate structure keep the high coastal tide out, so we don't have coastal flooding from your regular annual high tides. So looking back at the past 10 years, back in 2011, we discovered significant seepage under the tide gate structure. And by 2012, that seepage had worsened. And Roger Narson actually was on the work at this time. Valley Water performed seepage repairs. And that was taken care of. However, as we know, the structure is very weathered. Valley Water tried to repair the structure, a lot of the concrete spalls and the leaky tide gates. We tried to repair that structure to lengthen the life of the structure in 2017. But as Director Kremen discussed, you know, the contractor discovered additional damage and we were unable to complete that work. So in 2018, the capital project goal was changed to a structure replacement. And so in 2018 and 2019, we've been doing a lot of data gathering and modeling for the structure replacement project. And currently we're ongoing with the preliminary design. I'm going to show you a slide which shows the seepage, which back in 2012, so this is a picture of the bay, and you can see a vortex right in the middle of the screen. That's on the bay side of the tide gate structure, and water is getting sucked down through that hole, and then it's bubbling up on the other side, so completely bypassing the structure. Now this has been taken care of, at least for now. But here's some pictures of the current condition of the structure. You can see spalled concrete and exposed rebar, corroded as well. The tide gates on the right, very weathered. Some more photos on top, again, spalled concrete and exposed and corroded rebar. And now I want to go over some of the conceptual options that we've looked into. And in doing so, I also want to mention the Safer Bay study, which if you want to look into that in more detail, what the Safer Bay study is it was a large scale study done looking at the resilience for sea level rise along the San Francisco Bay here. And the study can actually be found on the main website of the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority website. And we mentioned in all these options, consistent with Safer Bay option 1. Safer Bay option 1 was essentially to raise the levees along the current levees to be accounted for the future sea level rise. Okay, so option A is no action, and that's just a baseline that we're going to look at what happens if we don't do anything, and then we'll talk about that in more detail on the next slide. Option B is to replace the tide gate structure in the existing location, and over here on the right, you can see that in orange here. This is actually not feasible because we need to keep a tide gate structure in full operation at all times. So we need the new tide gate structure to be constructed separate of the existing structure. So the existing structure is going to be in full use until the new structure is built. In option C, then, we looked at, well, what if we build a new structure right here, as you can see in the red, which is just adjacent to the existing structure. This option was rejected because as you can see in this picture, Hooks Island, which is sensitive habitat and has breeding for California ridgeways rail, is pretty much right outside, directly in front of that location. So we had concerns about potential erosion to the Hooks Island. Option D was then kind of similar to option C, but we tried moving. What if we move that tide gate structure further along the east, past Hooks Island? There's still some concerns about potential erosion impacts. It changes the hydraulics of the entire area. Again, it's not outletting in the same location. We'd have to dredge and excavate a lot of the material that's currently there in order to facilitate flows. And really, option C didn't really bring any real benefit, and instead raised a lot of concerns. So we moved past that. That was D, actually. Option E is to remove the tide gate structure entirely and build up the inner levees, which you can see in blue here, as well as build up the flood walls along the three creeks, Matadero, Barron, and Adobe. This is discussed actually in more detail in Safer Bay study option 2. This is a very large project, a lot longer timeline. And, we wanted to replace this tide gate structure on a shorter timeline. So we kind of rejected this for this replacement project. And the proposed project is option F, which is to replace the tide gate structure nearby on a new alignment. And we will move on to the next slide. So option A, which was the no action, again, it's a 63-year-old structure, it has structural and hydraulic deficiencies. Maintenance is becoming more and more problematic and costly. There's seismic vulnerabilities with the timber piles, cracked concrete, potentially liquefiable soils. We have leaking tide gates. The spalled concrete and the corroded rebar that you've seen is only going to continue to worsen with time. The existing structure doesn't really have adaptation for future sea level rise. And in the worst case, with a completely failed tide gate, we could see potential flooding of 400 to 700 parcels and a portion of Highway 101 due to annual high tide coastal flooding. And also, as Director Kremen mentioned, a failed tide gate structure would also close the trail indefinitely. So we don't want any of these things to happen. Now, option F, the proposed project, on the other hand, would continue coastal and creek flood protection, continued protection of the existing basin habitat. The anticipated construction will be 4 years. Now, although 4 years, the construction actually only occurs over a 5-month window from September 1st to January 31st. And that's to avoid impact to the California Ridgeways Rail. and other sensitive species. Would accommodate 2 feet of future sea level rise and a temporary trail closure for 41 months. That would be kind of localized to the project area, which we'll show in a later slide. The new tide gate structure would actually be 5 feet higher than the existing structure to be compatible and consistent with the future larger scale levee sea level rise resiliency projects. And the new tide gates, which are going to be side hinge tide gates, are a lot more efficient than the top hinge tide gates, which are currently out there, have improved operations and maintenance, and also reduced frequency of maintenance. Total project preliminary cost estimate is around $33 million. These next few slides are going to kind of walk through how the work would actually be carried out from the contractor. So in years 1 and 2, you can kind of see the squiggly line. First thing that the contractor would have to do is to dewater the work site. So basically constructing a cofferdam around the work area. Then they would install the piles, the new tide gate structure, build the levee work on the east, and construct the new outlet. Then in year 3, we'd move the dewatering system over to the left. And also in year 3, we would then remove the existing structure. Notice now already we would have the new tide gate structure in full use and do some of the groundwork for the new levee that's going to be built on the west. And then in the final year, we would complete the levee connecting to the new tide gate structure and remove the dewatering system. So this is kind of what it would look like. The tide gate structure is right in the middle. On both sides are the new levees, the trail on top, and the lines that you see on the sides, that's just the slope of the levee. So it's very similar to the existing levees. And these next 2 slides are just, if anybody is interested, they're sort of the engineering drawings, preliminary engineering drawings of the same thing. This is a plan view, and this is a profile view. Now, proposed construction staging area is going to be relatively close on site in the shaded areas in yellow. And in regards to anticipated construction traffic, for the first 2 years, we anticipate traffic would access through the San Antonio Road exit off Highway 101, directly onto the levee trail, as you can see on the screen. In years 3 and 4, we anticipate the traffic would access through the Embarcadero Road exit off Highway 101 and through the Bixby Park site. Regarding the trail, again, the portion of the trail that need to be closed for the duration of the project, which is estimated 41 months, is just a half-mile little red segment that you can see on the screen. The full Adobe Creek Loop Trail is about 5 miles. And the portions that you see in orange would be, opened up whenever there's not active construction going on, so that make sure that people can, use the trail for recreation, bird watching, and all that, exercise as much as possible. And we make sure that we have proper signage so that trail users are aware of any closures that are out there. And if you're trying to go from the north to the south or vice versa along the Bay Trail, there's also this route in purple, which is a detour. Going into some of the tentative target project schedule dates, where we anticipate completing the planning phase this summer, as well as releasing a draft CEQA MND or mitigated negative declaration for public comment sometime this summer, and completing the 100% design by spring 2021, as well as obtaining environmental permits by spring 2021. And then advertising and awarding the contract for construction in summer 2021, and then starting construction as early as fall 2021, and finishing by early 2025, finishing construction. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex Hunt, who's an environmental planner on this project, to go over a lot of the environmental considerations that we've taken into account on this project. Alex?
Thanks, Robert, and hello, everyone. As Robert mentioned, my name's Alex Hunt, and I'm the environmental planner that's supporting this project. First, I do want to acknowledge that we here at Valley Water appreciate the very special setting that this project occurs in. We're right along the bay and near some very large, nice patches of tidal salt marsh, which has been kind of decimated throughout the Bay Area from historic levels. So we know it's really important that we give these habitats the attention that they deserve. And this salt marsh habitat, along with the bay proper and the flood basin itself, support a number of special status fish and wildlife species. I've shown a few of these species here, some of the more charismatic of the bunch, including the burrowing owl and salt marsh harvest mouse. but there's many others, primarily a variety of nesting birds that could occur in the area, as well as some other special status fish. And in addition to the biological value of the area, the project, as we've mentioned, does support the Adobe Creek Loop Trail, which is part of the greater San Francisco Bay Trail. And during our site visits, we've really seen how heavily utilized this trail is. And even Valley Water staff who live in the area have emphasized it's important to us. I'd also mention that these trails provide broader access to the Palo Alto Baylands, as well as Bixby Park. And so moving on to the next slide, and keeping those important resources in mind, we thought really hard about ways to avoid and minimize our environmental impacts during our project development process. First and foremost, we knew that any way that we constructed this project, we were going to be limited to that reduced work period from September 1st to January 31st to make sure that we didn't disturb any nesting California ridgeways rails, which are both state and federally endangered. And limiting the work period to this reduced window is consistent with requirements from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but it does have the added benefit of also preventing impacts to the dozens of other nesting birds that could occur in the area. And so with that limited work period established, we kind of looked at what options were available to us, and all the options that Robert went through that occur kind of right along the existing tide gate structure itself result in pretty small and comparable wetland impacts. These impacts are generally limited to a 5-foot wide band of lower quality salt marsh that's intermixed with some riprap that occurs kind of right along the toe of the levee. And as Robert mentioned, after we did some hydrologic modeling and we looked at some of these options and their operational state, we did see that some options had the possibility of causing erosion along the edge of Hooks Island, which again is this big, nice patch of salt marsh. And so with that said, we rejected any of the options that could cause erosion on Hooks Island, specifically if we relocated the tide gate adjacent to the existing structure. And so we've aligned our tide gate, or the proposed tide gate, in a manner that ensures that this erosion doesn't occur. Without going into the technical details here, this figure essentially just shows the model results of flows coming through the tide gate in the proposed location. And it demonstrates that the flow velocities wouldn't be great enough to erode that edge of Hooks Island. Furthermore, we also sought options that would minimize the total length and duration of trail closure. But given that those impacts are unavoidable and will occur, we felt it was really important that we incorporated some new educational signage on or near the new tide gate structure, and we want to highlight the environmental resources that occur in the area to the public. Lastly, also worth mentioning is that, as Robert explained, due to their design and function, our proposed side hinge gates will remain open for a longer period of the tidal cycle than the existing top hinge gates that are currently on the structure. And so by using the side hinge gates, the project's actually expected to improve fish passage into the flood basin and then upstream into the creeks. And in addition to those design considerations, we'll also be implementing a number of best management practices so that we can avoid and minimize our impacts on things such as air quality, water quality, cultural resources, traffic, and hazardous materials, just to name a few. Moving on to the next slide. And despite all those design efforts, we will still, of course, have environmental impacts. And we're presently developing a suite of mitigation measures that are intended to reduce these impacts. Some of these measures may include having our biologists on site to perform pre-construction surveys for protected species, and then when appropriate, remaining on site to make sure that we're not impacting them. We're also planning on adding environmentally sensitive area fencing, or ESA fencing, and that's intended to keep the critters out of the project area to make sure we're not impacting them, but then also to make sure that we don't go into areas that we didn't intend to impact. We'll be providing environmental awareness trainings for the construction crews, We plan on developing a fish exclusion and relocation plan so that we can dewater the project area in a manner that we don't harm any fish. And then lastly, we'll be providing compensation for our relatively small wetland impacts by doing restoration work elsewhere in the Baylands or potentially working with a mitigation bank. As for environmental review, and moving on to the next slide, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, we're currently working on a mitigated negative declaration, which we anticipate we should be able to release for public review this summer. However, due to the shelter-in-place order, we might not be able to make that document a hard copy available in our office or at any public libraries, but we will be posting electronically to our website. The city of Palo Alto has also indicated they'll link to it on their website. We'll also be sending out notices to any interested parties when the MND is released. So if you are interested in obtaining a copy, please include your contact information. At the end of this presentation, there'll be a questionnaire and you can include it there, and we'll be sure to reach out to you so you get a chance to take a look at it. In regards to environmental permitting, given our project's location in this very sensitive area, we pretty much have every permit under the sun. We have permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. It's quite a mouthful. But we have been and we plan to continue engaging with all of these agencies regarding our design options and our impacts and ultimately mitigation. And specific to the trail detour, I really do want to emphasize that, we understand how important this trail is, and we've developed our detour plan based on recommendations from BCDC and Bay Trail staff. We'll also make sure to have really clear signage out there regarding the detour route, and we'll widely advertise the notice of the detour well in advance so that there's no surprises to trail users. And while we're doing everything that we can to minimize the temporary impact on trail users, we do need to balance the trail closure considerations with the needs of this important public safety project to ensure that we don't have flooding in our communities. And so with that, I'll pass it back over to Albert for the Q&A portion of the meeting.
All right, thank you, Alex. For temporarily, I'm going to hand off things to Melanie Richardson. We have someone in our attendee list that we want to introduce. Melanie?
Yes, thank you, Albert. I just wanted to note that Mr. Arthur Keller has joined us, and Arthur is a City of Palo Alto Planning and Transportation Commissioner and also a Valley Water Commissioner on our Environment and Water Resources Committee. So we really appreciate your attendance, Albert. I mean, excuse me, Arthur. Back to you, Albert. Can you hear me? I apologize.
Thank you. We can hear you loud and clear. So we're now going to move into our question and answer segment of the tonight's meeting. Again, please submit your questions through our Q&A portal. I do see some hands raised as well, so we'll be alternating back and forth. One of the, I see about 3 questions that was submitted in the chat box. So if David and Christoph, if you can submit via the Q&A portal, that would be helpful for us so that we don't lose track of your questions. All right. So what we're going to do now is going to go through our Q&A portal. Our first question is going to be coming from our Facebook live feed, actually, and it's asking, will the levees protect Palo Alto's 60 acres of baylands going to be, sorry, let me rephrase that. Will the levees protecting Palo Alto's 60 acres of baylands going to be raised as well? Project team, that question is your way. Roger, please unmute yourself.
Yes, this is Roger. And this project is focused on replacing this old structure. And there is a larger project, shoreline project, is going to take care of that kind of a bigger picture project that will be part of the shoreline project. So for the time being, it's only for this structure and adjoining levees is going back to the existing levees. So you have another project coming on board later in the it's in the planning phase to address all the levees to take care of the sea level rise in the future.
All right, thank you, Roger. We also received a submitted question via email from Brian Weber from the Santa Clara County, it was an acronym VCD, looks like the Vector Control District. Brian asked, will the tie gate replacement project eliminate the need for mosquito control on the property? Either Robert or Roger?
Yes, there are a few other factors, the vector control operation. They know that depends on the summer weather season as well as the water coming from the creek. It varies quite a bit. And so there are a lot of other factors. We cannot say exactly, yeah, it's going to be improving, but it's better than what we have right now. So because of we have more control and than the existing structure. So it's going to be better than what we have right now, but we cannot totally eliminate spraying in the future because that all depends on the higher temperature in the future, and then you're talking about the creek inflow, how much is going to come through in the summertime, and so there are a lot of other factors playing to this.
All right, thank you so much. And I just want to mention that a lot of us are joining from our homes. We have about 38 attendees who have joined us via Zoom, and also about 9 joining us via Facebook Live. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I'm now going to hop on over to our raised hands. Arthur, I know you had your raised hand earlier when we were doing introductions, but in the chance that you might have a verbal question, I'm going to enable your microphone. And Arthur, if you have a question, you're free to ask it and just say hello as well.
Hi, thank you. This is a very important project. And by the way, I'm no longer on the Planning Commission, but I am still on I'm still chair of the Water and the Environmental and Water Resources Committee. So one of the questions is, how will this affect the choices of the various projects that are by the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority?
All right, project team, the question was, how is this project going to affect SFJPA's projects?
Robert, you want to take that?
Yeah, we're working. We're always staying in the loop, and we're discussing with the team that's working with the Army Corps project, the Shoreline Phase 2, and we're trying to balance the risk of the existing structure. And again, it's 63 years old, and we have to look at the need to have this project come through for the replacement structure. And we don't know exactly how long the planning and all of the design modeling for the Shoreline Phase 2. So we're trying to balance that, and so right now we're working on the replacement structure. Again, we're trying to coordinate in coordination with the Shoreline Phase 2 as well. So we're sharing information if anything else comes up.
So the top of the structure here, as Robert said, it's going to be 5 feet higher than the existing. So the top of the structure elevation is consistent with the Shoreline project, the future Shoreline project, which we have done some studies and conceptual modeling. That will be consistent with also with another shoreline work which is going on, EAA 11, nearby Coyote Creek, in between Coyote Creek and Guadalupe Creek. There is another shoreline project which is going to get constructed pretty soon. So that the top of the elevation of the structure will be consistent with that levee top of the height. So we are talking about the whole county-wide shoreline project. The elevation will be consistent with the structure.
All right, great, thank you. We're gonna shift back over to a Q&A portal here. Shani asked, Robert, you mentioned mitigation banks and offsite mitigation. What species do you expect to use this for?
Hi, Shani. Actually, I'm going to let Alex handle that. Alex, you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Thanks, Shani, for the question. We're actually not talking about using mitigation banks for species, but rather for our wetland impacts. And so the project, as it's currently described, has a permanent impact on about 0.09 acre of tidal salt marsh habitat. And as I mentioned, it's a kind of a marginal habitat area that occurs right along the bottom of the levee toe in a narrow band about 5 feet wide. And in some locations, there's riprap interspersed. And so it's not really breeding habitat for the ridgeways rail. And so we're not actually proposing mitigation specific for those species, but rather for wetlands in general. But wherever we do mitigate for our wetlands, it will undoubtedly benefit all the tidal marsh species we deal with, whether it's ridgeways rails or salt marsh harvest mouse.
Great, thank you. Thank you, David, for putting your question to our Q&A portal. So David Moss asks, trail closed for 41 months is a long time, especially since work will only be for several months a year for 4 years. Can we reduce this by bypassing the construction and using the existing gate for as long as possible?
Yeah, let me answer that. As we have seen the slide before what Robert was showing, the year 1, year 2, we have a kind of a cofferdam joining the existing structure all around. So year 1, year 2, we are going to remove the existing levee. So that will be disconnect with the existing structure on the current trail as soon as we remove the levee, because we had to work in that area for the new structure, new piling system. We had to dewater it, and we had to construct the levee. So I wish we could connect with the existing structure and area during this time, but we had right in the middle of it, we had to work on the dewatering system. That's why we cannot do it. And regarding the half a mile long of the trail, which we had to close, we had to balance out the risk, public safety versus the construction traffic. We can see whenever you have within half a mile, depending on the construction activities, we can open up the trail, so they can also go through the area, but it won't be like we cannot say right now. It's based on the construction scheduling, what the contractor is planning to do. So there are so many things into that. So when it comes to construction, there's a lot of opportunities that could be shared, that half a mile area.
Yeah, I thank you, Roger, for that. And I also know there's some considerations from an environmental perspective as well about the timeline. And so, Alex, if you can chime in as well. I know you mentioned during your comments about how this timeline is informed by our concerns or environmental concerns as well.
Yeah, no, we definitely appreciate that it's a long period of time that the trail is going to be closed. And as Robert and Roger have mentioned, trail users will be able to, for at least 7 months of the year, utilize the trail all the way out towards our kind of project area where we have that closure of about a half mile. And so, yeah, those areas will be available to the public for recreation and bird watching and so forth. Unfortunately, they won't be able to complete the entire loop during that period, but there are a number of other detours in the area that allow trail users, if you're using it as a commuter, or if you're just trying to have access to the Baylands in general, places where you kind of will have that access available.
There are also,
Thank you, Alex.
there's a lot of other loop trail portions out there as well that are great. And right, we're restricting the construction to avoid impacts to a lot of sensitive species, which is lengthening the total construction time.
All right, thank you all. I'm going to shift over to a raised hand here. Roy Schneider, I'm going to enable your microphone. Just give me 1 second here, and then you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your verbal question. Roy Schneider.
Yes, can you hear me?
There you go. Loud and clear.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I want to follow up on the previous discussion. I live in Palo Alto and go out to the Baylands quite frequently, and shutting down that loop for 41 months for whatever reason is unacceptable. We're having a problem right now with the Adobe Pass overpass construction shutting down access. And you folks need to come up with some type of a workaround other than the West Bay Shore Trail detour to ensure that the loop stays open, or at least is not shut down for 41 months. So not a question, just a comment from citizens of Palo Alto. And you'll be getting a lot more of them if this goes forward like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And I know that we had some mentions of that concern as well during the presentation. So Robert, I think you were looking to respond to that.
Well, I mean, we definitely are trying to balance the need for the tie gate structure to be replaced in a timely manner as well. It's not impossible. There's obviously some things that can be done. It's just you know, other methods can be very expensive and also add a lot of cost and time to the overall construction schedule, and additional environmental impacts as well. If we're talking about trying to create a temporary bridge or some sort of a detour at the project site to continue the loop just for a very short, I mean, relatively short construction time. And so it kind of adds a lot. And so we're trying to balance all sides of the whole matter.
That's correct. We looked into having a separate bridge, separate path with the sheet piles on both sides, having a path, and with the fence. We're thinking about going along the basin, bypassing the whole area, but that's going to have a lot of environmental impact. And we have 3 creek flows coming to the basin that has to cross this temporary bypass back into the structure. So there'll be a lot of other issues. It's going to increase the season most likely by 2 more years, and not to mention about the cost. So, and the environmental impacts. That's the reason we looked into that. So it's not like but then we were thinking about, okay, that we had to balance all those, as Robert said.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question here is from Facebook Live. We have a question from Liz Bond. I'm not quite sure the context of this question, but she asked, what about PFOS on Malone? PFOS on Malone. Does that sound familiar to you, to the team?
PFOS.
Liz, if you're listening to us, if you can clarify your comment or question on Facebook, that would be great for staff, and so we can better understand what you're asking us. We'll come back to that, hopefully, Liz, if you're able to clarify your question. We're going to move on here to a question from Christopher Fujimoto. The existing tie gate has a trash debris boom in the flood basin. Will the new proposal include a similar boom?
Yes, we are going to have trash rack on both sides, bay side as well as the basin side. For example, we have a lot of frequent maintenance needed. It's not only debris coming from the basin, these 3 creeks, we have also debris coming from the bay side. You know, people may not think that there's a lot of debris coming from the bay side. It did. A lot of floating debris, they come in, they block the tide gate. So right now there's no rack on the bay side. So the proposal is to have trash racks on both sides, and we'll have a wider width on the top of the structure, so you can have a crane with the outriggers can easily clean up the debris on both sides. So that's why you'll have a less frequent maintenance with the new structure compared to the maintenance what we have.
And yeah, a similar boom as well in front on the basin side.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And this next question came through our chat box. It was from Christophe Labelle. Will the environmental documentation that Alex described be on the project website? I'm sure that the team can post it online for comments. We'll make sure to post it. Alex, you want anything to add to that as well?
Yes, it will definitely be posted on our website. The city of Palo Alto We'll also be providing a link to it on their website. And then, as I mentioned before, when we do send it out, we'll be sending it out to a list of interested parties. And at the end of this presentation today, there will be an opportunity to provide your contact information. If you provide your contact information there, we'll send out an email that notices you when it's available.
All right, great, thank you. All right, just as a reminder, please feel free to also continue raising your hand. I think we saw one just pop up here. I'm going to shift over to a verbal question. So it's going to be a question from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Babak. I'm going to enable your mic and go ahead and unmute yourself. Ask your question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Babak Ibrahimi. I'm Assistant Manager at Vector Control District. We are here in this webinar along with a couple of members of the district. I think the very first questions came from my my colleague in San Mateo County Vector Control District about the impact of environmental impacts of this project and in fact the flood basin. The fact is that flood basin is one of the most expensive and time-consuming lands that we are dealing with in terms of mosquito control. And so there are two main questions. First of all, I was wondering if anyone has consulted with any vector control districts or have looked at any environmental impacts of mosquito breeding sites in the area. No one, as far as I'm concerned, I couldn't find anything in our site. The second one is that how does this project, the duration of the project impact the water flow into the flood basin? We need to be prepared. So if there is any change in the water flow, we need to be ahead of the game so we can control mosquito population. Every time, especially what happened last week, every time there is any water leakage in the flood basin, we see the high rise of the mosquito populations. We have to take action. One example is last year, we had just for one weekend, we had about 150 calls from the residents of Palo Alto because there was water went to the flood basin and, they impacted residents. At the end, I can provide my information. I would appreciate if someone reach out to us so we can consult on the issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so yes, definitely provide your information on the feedback survey. We'll have the team reach out back to you. In terms of a response, Roger or Robert?
Let me answer that, and then Robert, you can follow up on that. So as you know, we have one sluice gate operation, which is operated by the City of Palo Alto. They operate to let the water in, to drain the basin water out. So the operations, the City of Palo Alto Parks, they do that. We have similar operations, one dedicated bay with a larger opening, the same thing with a motorized sluice gate we have. So the operation-wise, it is better. You can do it from the treatment plant. We have SCADA attached to this one. It's motor controlled rather than manual. So, and also we have water elevation on both sides. We have ultrasound water indicator on both sides. So it's going to give us more flexibility in operation with the new structure compared to what we have right now. That's one element that's going to improve. And so once we see there's an issue with the water getting in, stagnant water, or it's not draining out, we can take action with this kind of flexibility. That's one thing this project will bring on.
Yeah, I just want to add, Babak, thank you. And last week, the issue was a rail tie from the railroad that washed into the tide gate and jammed one of the gates open, which was washed in from the bayside. And so the trash racks that we're going to be installing on the bayside for the new structure will also help against these maintenance issues, as well as the existing structure has a lot of leaking going through the tide gates and through a lot of the cracked concrete, which is right now causing a lot of the concern for higher than desired water levels in the basin, which result in the mosquito fly off. So I think we will see improvements in that maintenance operations. maintaining the water level. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. All right, moving on to our next question here from David Moss. Is there a plan to move Coast KC water directly to the marsh, straight out from it, and not into the Palo Basin during construction?
There is, we can do that, but the output from the Coast KC is only 150 CFS compared to the bigger picture of 6,000 CFS coming from the creeks, 100-year flood. So we can talk to City of Palo Alto to see if we can divert the flow from that to the other area, but it's a small flow, relatively small flow compared to the other 3 creek input. So we can look into that, we can answer later on.
All right, great, thank you. And as a reminder, please be sure to submit your questions via our Q&A portal. Questions that come through our chat box does tend to get buried at times. I know on our panel side, we have a lot of messages going back and forth, and we lose track of those questions pretty quickly. All right, moving on to our next question here from Christopher Kujimoto, the similar trash screen question. He asked, does the new proposed tie gate have trash screens to capture trash prior to entry into San Francisco Bay?
Robert?
Yeah. I just want to say yes.
All right, short and simple. Thank you so much. All right.
I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Our next question here is from Eileen McLaughlin. Can you explain how you concluded that an MND will be adequate for this project, not an EIR? That might be an environmental question. Alex or anyone on your team?
Yeah, I can take that. Thank you for the question. Yeah. So we performed an initial study, under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and at a very simple level, we didn't identify any impacts on resources that we didn't feel that we could mitigate to a less than significant level. As it currently stands, any of our only potentially significant impacts under CEQA are related to biological resources. And as I described during the presentation portion, we have a number of mitigation measures in place that we feel adequately mitigate those impacts to a less than significant level. For instance, having biological monitors and doing surveys, excluding any critters from the area with ESA fencing, and dewatering the area in a way where we can capture fish and relocate them in a manner so they're not harmed, and then providing compensation for our, again, relatively small wetland impacts.
All right, great, thank you. Roy, I think I saw your question submitted, but you may have asked that verbally already as well, or I'm sorry, you may have made the comment verbally as well, so we'll move on to the next question here. From my John Purcell, could you tell us about the dewatering system you plan to use? When does this project open to the public to bid? Forgive me if I missed it, I can't hear perfectly.
Robert, you want to answer that schedule and the dewatering system?
Sure. Regarding the timing, at the earliest, this would be summer 2021. Again, we're still on the 30% planning phase right now, so we're not quite there yet to say for certain on the bid, but the dewatering system, we've been working a lot with looking at impacts to the area, which Alex talked about. And so we're looking at trying to use a dewatering system, sheet pile dewatering system that's not installed with the typical impact hammer, which causes a lot of vibrations that could potentially impact environmental, marine through vibrations in the water. So I'm looking at a dewatering system using sheet piles that would be placed, that would be pushed into the location.
Great, thank you.
One thing I might just add to that is, yeah, as Robert mentioned, one thing that we've done as part of our environmental analysis is looking at potential hydroacoustic impacts. So those are impacts of sound through the water on fish and marine mammals. And working with a consultant on that, we developed some ways of reducing, both airborne and sound in water. And one of them was through our dewatering system of pressing the piles into the mud rather than hammering them in.
All right, great, thank you. We have a question from Facebook. This was a question about whether we will be posting the slide deck on our website. The slide deck is actually on the website already, so you can go to valleywater.org/P as in Paul, A as in Alan, F as in Frank, B as in Bob, Tidegates, PAFB Tidegates. So valleywater.org, PFB Tidegates, and we will also be posting other documents on the website as well. All right, next question is going to come from John, I want to say Petrilla. How many years of sea rise protection will the new gate provide? Project team?
So if you look at the bigger picture of the shoreline study, which had a 50-year target since 2017 to 2067, they had projected a medium sea level rise of 2 feet 8 inches. This project gets around 2 feet. So around 30 to 35 years of protection you would get from the structure for sea level rise.
All right, thank you. Again, just as a quick note, I typed in the address up to the website into the Q&A portal, but I also will be doing the same thing right now for the chat box in a bit here. Let's see here. We have another question from Shani. We asked previously about having 2 gates that can be operated manually. I'm not sure if I phrased it correctly, but it looks like we asked previously about having 2 gates that can be operated manually. Robert or Roger, does that sound like a question you're able to address?
Yes, Robert?
Yeah, Shani. We've been talking with the city about this as well. We think 2 gates also brings up, it adds a lot of cost, and I think the main reason or the main thing we wanted to get out of that was to make sure that if there's any repair that needed to be done on that gate or any malfunction, firstly we will make sure the new gate or the new sluice gate that the city operates is going to have one, it'll be able to be operated manually. It'll have the normal controls programmed from the wastewater treatment plant. They can operate it or control it remotely. It'll have a hookup for a generator if it's due to a power outage. It'll, like I said, it'll be able to open manually. Also, all of the tide gates will be able to open up. Let me back up first. The new sluice gate will be housed in its own bay, and so we'll now have the ability, if in the worst case, if it needed to be replaced, it would be very easy to go in and dewater just the bay that contains the sluice gate and replace it quickly. In the meanwhile, all of the passive tide gates will be able to be opened manually to perform the function of the sluice gate. And so we think that handles the concern of how do we replace the sluice gate if it ever becomes damaged and needs to be repaired, without adding additional length of the structure and having yet a second motorized sluice gate that would need to be maintained. Roger, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that the right now the opening is 5 feet by 5 feet, the existing sluice gate. Our proposal for the new sluice gate is almost double as much as, that's where we are in the initial stage to design a larger sluice gate, so we have more operational flexibility. So that's one of the things, and it's not going to be unlike the current one. We can pretty much do the maintenance at a faster pace than the current operations. That's what we are looking at right now.
You'll be able to have it on a schedule as well, so it can be fully programmed, fully automated for the sluice gate, as opposed to currently where it's more of a manual operation.
All right, thank you. We had a question come through via chat. Again, as a reminder, please feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a verbal question or submit them to the Q&A portal. Arthur Keller asked earlier, did Valley Water sign the agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers to design the alternatives for the permanent project? And how is that project coming along? He also asked a second question once you answer that first one, so I'll hold off the second one. So again, the first question Arthur asked was, did Valley Water sign the agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers to design the alternatives for the permanent project, and how's that project coming along?
Okay, Robert, you want to take that?
I mean, I think we need to get back to make sure we answer that question correctly, but it's still in the early planning phases, the shoreline phase 2, and so they're still looking into a few different alternatives as well. So, but we'll make sure. I'm in coordination with the project manager and the team for the shoreline phase 2. So we'll circle back and get a written response back to Mr. Keller.
All right, thank you. His second question was, what parcels would be affected by the proposed project? Will these parcels be affected only if the project fails? The project team?
Robert, you want to?
Yeah, we can't say with that much confidence exactly which parcels. I don't want to raise alarm to that, and it's also the bay is dynamic, how it rises and falls, and it really depends on the level of failure of the tide gate. I don't think we're there. We're definitely not there yet, but
so this is a bigger part.
Plan. You want to talk about that
Yes.
as well?
Yeah, we have a emergency action plan. But if you look at what if the tide gate structure fails, as we mentioned in the beginning, we had 400 to 700 parcels, residential, commercial, industrial parcels, and plus Highway 101. So that is being there. If you look at even the slide number 2, you have the blue shade showing the impact area if it fails. So that was mapped based on the basin failure. What if it failed? How much water will get inland? So that gives an idea how much it can flood.
Correct.
If you look at the
FEMA flood
the
map.
FEMA map. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the creeks are currently, they're rated for the 100-year flood, 100-year storm event, and like you said in the first slide, the blue area, and also if you go to the FEMA flood maps, that is because of potential coastal flooding.
And the current levees are not certified levees. They are not. That's the reason FEMA assumed that levee had failed. They mapped as if the levee had failed. That's why they mapped way far out.
All right, great, thank you. So just again, we do have some time here. If you have any additional questions, if you happen to think of one later on, please feel free to also send it our way via email or our contact information on the project website. Again, we do take these questions seriously. We take into account and consider your feedback. The project team does take a look at several different factors as they plan the project, and we definitely will post different items and documents online, and we'll send it to our email list as they become available. Again, if you would like to ask a verbal question, please raise your hand. You can also submit through the Q&A portal. I want to give everyone a last chance here before we end the night.
Drags inside for them to die.
All right, so looking like we are at the end of it. We have one raised hand here, just getting your question. Arthur, I'm going to enable your microphone. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. You mentioned that the affected parcels would be would be based on the affected based on being in the San Francisco Creek. Based on being in the flood zone for between the two creeks. So would that be a way of figuring it out that if they're in a flood zone, then they'll be affected?
Right now, the FEMA mapping, that's why they are showing. It's a co-mingling of San Francisco Creek and these three creeks and the basin failed conditions. So it's a co-mingled mapping at this time. So they need to separate them out. We need to separate them out, the new mapping. Then you would know how, if this levee fails, what is the impact. That's the second step we have to do. The FEMA mapping is not done, separating these two.
Okay. So right now, the old maps do have it separated out. So if I'm in the AE floodplain, I'm in the same. If I'm in the floodplain for the bay, then I should be at risk here. So therefore, that will be at risk for everybody who has for this flooding.
Yes, if you see the FEMA map, it's the AE zone with the elevation 11, with the zip, some kind of color map showing all the parcels all the way beyond Highway 101. So it's kind of a big polygon. So that's where the FEMA has mapped right now, with the AE zone elevation 11.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for your question, Arthur. All right, so we do have Babak, he did submit a request to we can share our contact information. Robert, did you have our information on the slide? If you can re-show that on the screen. If not, I can also type it into.
It doesn't have our email on there, but I would want to say that if you go to the website, which is you can find on valleywater.org through our projects, or as Albert had said, valleywater.org /PAFB tide gates. On there, it has, you scroll down, it has my name, Robert Yamane, in blue. If you click on that, it pops up my email, and you could send it to me that way. Or you can also provide your email address in the survey that you'll get right after the meeting closes, and I'll get back to you as well.
All right, great.
Mm-hmm.
And just to follow up on that other question we had earlier about PFOS or PFOS, I don't think Liz was able to clarify, so we may have to, if Liz, if you're listening out there after the fact, please feel free to send that question or clarification to us through email. We're heading towards the end of our night here. I do want to open the floor to Robert, Roger, and Alex. If there are any other details that you'd like to share about this project that we may not have covered in our Q&A segment.
Roger, your mic is muted.
Robert, we can mention about the Schaffen-Wheeler report, July 2016, that has got more details if people are interested in looking at the tide cycle, how this one works versus all the datum changes. Is more detailed information. Someone wants to look at it, we can post it at our site.
Okay, we'll get that that study done and put on the website as well.
All right, and it looks like Arthur has an additional question here. Arthur, I'm going to re-enable your mic. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
I already asked my last question, but thank you very much for having this meeting, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so what we're going to do now is going to our next step segment, and we're going to wrap up our night. So team, take it away.
Okay, so the next steps, as we talked about in the presentation, next steps will be to look out for the draft CEQA mitigated negative declaration, which we anticipate will be posted for public comment this summer to our project website, as well as I believe the city website as well. One way you can sign up for project related email updates via the project website. There'll be another public meeting in the future, and we'll be able to let you know that way if you sign up for email updates or information updates. Again, www.valleywater.org /PAFB tide gates. And now I'll hand the floor back to Melanie Richardson for closing remarks. Melanie?
Okay, thank you very much, Robert, and thanks to all of the Valley Water team for your informative presentation. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and our staff to listen to this presentation and ask your very important questions. At the end of this meeting, There will be a prompt to take a feedback survey, and we would strongly encourage you to do that because that really helps us to make these community meetings better for you. It's short. It probably will take about 5 minutes of your time. And so we very much appreciate it so we can make these meetings work best for you. Please remember to provide your contact information if you would like a response. And with that, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and good rest of your night. Thank you.